read 1 Samuel 17 today. It's a familiar story, and I'll talk about that familiarity a little bit. But I'm going to read it first. I'm going to read the story from 1 Samuel 17. And then I'll explain a couple things in the story, just some units of measurements. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soka in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes-dammim between Soka and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another with a valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Okay, 6 cubits and a span is more than 9 feet. Okay, so his height was over 9 feet. So I'm about 5'7", 8, 6, 7, 8. I mean, the ceiling is probably like 8. So he's higher than the ceiling. And probably actually close to, it's actually about 9 feet 9 inches, so almost 10 feet. So being the basketball net, it's about a few inches short. Basketball is the top of his head. So with his hair gel, it's like pretty much basketball net. He had a bronze helmet, so the helmet makes him 10 feet, right, on his head, and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. So that 5,000 shekels is about 125 pounds. Okay, so some of you probably weigh less than 125 pounds, but that is his armor. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its the iron point on the spear shaft was 600 shekels, which is about 15 pounds. So his spear shaft is, the iron point itself is 15 pounds. His shield bearer went ahead of him, probably because his shield is so heavy. Just somebody has to carry his shield, and then when he goes into battle, he picks up the actual shield. So Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephraite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, then the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth with Saul to tend his father's sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to the camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines." So early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up and set out, as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going into its battle position, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage, and he will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine or removes the disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he would defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what he had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he had defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in a pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran over and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sharim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Philistines returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, and he said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is that young man? Abner replied, as surely as you live, your majesty, I don't know. The king said, find out whose son this young man is. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. Who here plays piano? Who's playing piano? Play piano. Okay, for you. I played piano growing up. I started playing piano when I was 5. I went to private lessons, all growing up, and then I went to I took lessons at a college level conservatory when I was in middle school. I was a very good pianist, and I played piano very well. And then I also learned. I went to another college in high school to study piano and learned jazz piano there. And then I actually learned. I took lessons to learn piano in accompaniment which is a different skill. I learned how to play piano to accompany choirs, which is a totally different. You would think, oh, you can play piano, you could probably play piano for a choir, no problem, right? But actually, one of the things about playing as an accompanist is, you go into the first day of choir at your school, for example, and then on the very first day when the teacher gives you music, as the pianist accompanist, you can't be like, oh, give me a couple weeks to learn it. I mean, you got to play right on the spot, right? So you have to learn how to be able to modify the music and play the parts that need to be played and lead the choir and such. It's sort of a different kind of skill. But one of the greatest challenges I had in learning piano was not any of these things, but actually when I transitioned to another instrument, which I thought was just like piano, and that's organ. So I studied organ as well, and a huge this chapel sees thousands of people, a huge organ with huge pipes and everything. And I looked at the organ and like this piano here, and I looked at it and I was saying, oh, well, that's going to be easy, right? I'm going to just play the notes, right? And the notes look exactly like piano. And sure, there was like 3 or 4 different levels or whatever, right? There's different, but you just put different hands on different ones. It's still the same thing. Then I realized something different about organ. There's feet, right? So it basically, it used to be just right hand and left hand. Now there's also feet. And the feet, there's actually a left foot and right foot. There's also volume, and the volume controls on the feet. And all of a sudden, something that seemed very familiar, and seemed which was like, this is going to be easy, started to seem a lot more complicated. And then I realized the most complicated thing, the most difficult thing about piano actually, or organ, wasn't even the feet. It was the fact that when you play a note on the organ, it's only on or off. The note is either being played or it's not. It's like a light switch, right? It's on or off, right? Whereas on a piano or on a string instrument or a brass instrument or on a guitar, when you hit a note, there's what's called an attack. There's a sound which at first attacks and then it rings out. And so when you play on a piano, you hit a note, it sounds very loud, or if softer, if you play softly, but then as you hold that note, the sound kind of fades away. Right? And it's just like a lot of other instruments, as you lose a breath or whatever. So I realized that organ was very different because you could just hold down something and then you could just hold it and it would just continue to play and play and play as long as you hold it, because that's just how it was. But then I realized something even more difficult about that was that because of that dynamic, there was something I needed to learn how to do, which was different. Before on piano, if I had a note and I had to play it for a certain amount of time, I would play it for that amount of time and I would hold it for that note for the amount of time. So let's just say those 2 lines represent the beginning and the end of the note. But then, when you play on piano, if you were to play that note twice, you would just play it one right after the other, right? So, play that note twice, you would just play it like that. You just play the note, and then you let go of the note, and then you play the note, and then let go of the note, right? And then because of the attack of the note, as you would hear it, you would play it like that. But an organ is totally different. Because the note doesn't have that kind of attack, it doesn't have that fading sound as you play it, you can't play a note like that. If you play 2 notes on an organ like this, it just sounds like one note. What you audibly hear on one note, because there's such a brief period of time, a break there, and the volume is the same the whole way through, what you're going to hear is just one note across the whole time, with maybe an imperceptible break here. And so in organ, what you have to do is you don't play it like this. You play the first note the whole time, and then you leave a bigger break between that and the second note. So what used to be 100%, it was a 50 and 50, now it becomes 50, and then 25 of a break, and then 25. And then I realized not only do I have to take care of the feet and take care of the volume of that, but I had to take care of this but I had to do this for every finger, for every note. Unlike a lot of other instruments on piano or organ, you don't just play one note at a time. So some notes, so the 4th finger on it would have to do this, while the 3rd note would not do this because it's changing to a different note, it would not do this. So each finger had to work independently. And what I thought was just, I was just going to be, it's just piano, except it's just electric, right? Because I was so familiar with piano. I realized that, wait a minute, this is, I don't understand this at all. It was right there, but maybe there's something more here. Maybe I have to rethink for a moment. And that's the way I think this story is. I think because even if you didn't grow up in church, even if this is your first time being here, even if you didn't, if you've lived in America, or even if you've lived in other places in the world, you may have heard of David and Goliath. You've heard the story. Maybe you've never read the whole thing like that, or never been read to you, but you've maybe seen a picture. Right? Where I live in Carmel Mountain Ranch, there's a particular donut shop. It's called Sesame Donuts, and this donut shop has been there, I guess, many years. And a few years back, a big chain donut shop opened in the same parking lot as them. It's a Krispy Kreme donut, and people were very upset. The big chain's coming in and trying to shut down the mom and pop store by putting that. And the picture of the Sesame Donuts there, they put up a poster. And the poster is of a huge giant with a sword or shield and stuff like that, and a little boy. Right? Obviously, just trying to show in people's minds of kind of how the underdog, they're the little David, and the big giant's coming here and they're saying, you should support us. You come to here to buy donuts, don't go over to Krispy Kreme. Right? That's their message, because people know that story. Even if you're not a Christian and don't come to church, or you've heard that David and Goliath, you know that. But I want to suggest to you that maybe there's something, maybe it's a little bit more complicated. Maybe it's not necessarily complicated, but maybe there's something beyond what you've heard before, what you've been told before, what you think the story is about. And I want to show you to you right here in the text. I want to show you it right here in the Bible. Because what we think David and Goliath is about, what we think it's about, is about David's bravery.